Hi class, we are looking at part 2 of lesson 8.6, which is factoring quadratic trinomials. And if you'll recall, last time we looked where the leading coefficient is 1, or a is 1. And just as a review, what we would do is take, to figure out how to factor it, we would take c, which is that last constant, and find the factors of it. The factors of 12, we'll do this one together, are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. And then we look at, it is a plus 12. So either both of these need to be positive or both of them need to be negative. But because B is positive, we know that they both have to be positive. So then we take those factors and see which factors can I use and manipulate to make the number 8. And if I combine 1 and 12 in any way, I will not get an 8. But if I combine 2 and 6, I will get an 8. And we said they both have to be positive. So positive 2 plus 6 would give me a positive 8. So once I do that, then I have part of my factored form. The first term, t squared, would be t times t. And then we got the plus 2 and the plus 6. And you can always use FOIL to multiply them out to make sure that you're getting what you started with. This part, we are looking now where a is not 1. So our leading coefficient is not 1. Now remember, a cannot be 0. So that means it is something other than 1 or 0. And on number 13 through 24, all of them have a leading coefficient that is not 1 or 0. And if we were to factor that, it's a little more complicated. You will see some similarities to what we were doing before, but it's a little more extensive. Basically, you start factoring and you keep factoring until you can't factor anymore. I did take a few notes that I'm going to go over quickly, and we need to talk about first. So we are looking at factoring a quadratic expression where the leading coefficient is not 1. Okay, so again, this is a quadratic expression in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. And I put a little note here. If you can factor something out of the whole expression, do that first. So here are the steps basically to factoring. The first thing is you're going to multiply a times c. So whatever that leading coefficient is and that last constant, you're going to multiply them together. And from the product found in number 1, from the answer, you're going to find factors that you can manipulate to get b. So it's very similar to what we were doing before. However, you got to see if you can factor the whole thing, and then you need to multiply a and c first. You're going to, this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and it won't really make sense until we start looking into it, but you're going to rewrite the expression so that bx is split into the factors found in number 2. So we'll look at what that means in a second. And you're going to make sure you group the terms so you can continue to factor. And then you just continue factoring until you have 2 binomials. Now I did put a little asterisk here when it says from the product found in number 1, find the factors that you can manipulate to get b. A little note. There exists such a thing as a prime quadratic expression. If you cannot manipulate the factors to make b, then the expression is prime. It cannot be factored. It cannot be factored. So be aware that that is an option. All right, I did put several down that we're going to do together before we look at our actual skills practice page. And the first one we're going to look at is 4x squared plus 4x minus 3. All right, the first thing you look at, can I factor anything out of the whole thing? And really, out of the whole thing, you're looking at these first numbers, 4, 4, and 3. There is nothing I can factor out. So then I multiply A times C. Now A is 4, C is -3. So when I multiply them together, I get -12, okay? Now we need to look at the factors of -12 that will give me a +4. All right, the factors of -12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Now, because it's negative, one of these has to be negative. Either 1 has to be negative or 12, or 2 has to be negative or 6. 3 has to be negative or the 4, but one of them has to be negative. Now, if I look at this, because B is positive, I need the bigger factor to be positive, so that means the smaller factor is negative. So the 12 would be positive, the 1 would be negative. And if I combine them together, -1 plus 12, I get 11. That does not work. The smaller one has to be negative, the bigger one has to be positive. If I combine -2 and 6, bingo, that gives me 4. So it is going to be -2 and +6. Those are our numbers I'm working at. Okay, this is where I think you guys can understand, multiplying A times C and then manipulating. We did that before. Where it gets a little bit tricky is we're going to rewrite this so that instead of a +4x, we're going to have a -2x plus 6x. But I've got to arrange it in a way so that I can factor, okay? And this, well, let's just get started. So I'm going to do 4x squared, and instead of a +4x, I'm going to put a -2x plus 6x. I need to put that in the middle there, and then we're going to do -3. Okay. I need to make sure, what you need to do is we got to be just strategic on which one we put first and which one we put second, because we need to be able to factor something out of the first two terms. So does 4 and -2 have something in common? Does it have a factor in common? That is yes. 4 and 6 also, we could factor something out of there. So it really does not matter which one, because either one will work. But I'm thinking a little bit ahead. I see that I've got this -3, and I kind of want the 6 to go with the -3. Again, it doesn't matter. You'll get the same thing either way. So I'm going to put the -2x first. So -2x, and then the +6x. All right. So again, what you do is you take A and C and multiply. Got -12. Find the factors that will make a +4. And the factors were -2 and 6. And instead of a +4x, we're going to put -2x plus 6x. I want you to understand that if I were to simplify that, that still will be 4x. I haven't changed anything. I just kind of wrote it in a different way. Now, last week, we did that whole lesson on using the distributive property. When we set it up this way, then we can factor something out of this set of terms, and I can factor something out of this set of terms, okay? So what can I factor out of 4x squared minus 2x? Well, you can factor a 2, and you can factor an x. And if I do that, 4x squared divided by 2x would be 2x, minus 2x divided by 2x is 1. So do you remember doing that last week? Now it is coming full circle. All right, plus, what can we factor out of 6x minus 3? Well, we can factor out a 3. And if I factor out a 3, 6x divided by 3 is 2x, minus 3 divided by 3 is 1, okay? So now I have a common factor in both of these terms. I've got 2x minus 1. So I can factor out this common factor, and that leaves 2x plus 3. So this, I'm going to factor again. I'm going to factor out 2x minus 1 because they both have that. And when I divide both of these by 2x minus 1, you end up with 2x plus 3. So that is our second binomial. And so there you have it. And if you were to multiply it out, you would have 4x squared. Outer would be the 6x. Inner would be the negative 2x. And then the last would be negative 3. All right, let's look at number 2. All right, once again, you got to look at the whole thing and see if I can factor out something to start with. Does 18, 15, and 18 have a common factor? Well, the answer is yes. You can factor out a 3. So we always want to factor something out if we can do it first. So 18h squared divided by 3, that would be 6h squared, plus 15h would divide by 3 be 5h, minus 6. Okay, so now this is in, we can't factor anything else out. Now, one thing I want to caution you about, we need to remember this. We cannot ignore it. We're going to ignore it for a minute, but we need to come back to this. All right, so now we start. We multiply 6 times negative 6. So we multiply a times c, and that is negative 36. And I'm looking for the factors of negative 36 that when I manipulate them, I'm going to get positive 5, okay? To get negative 36, one of my factors has to be negative. Because b is positive, the bigger factor has to be positive and the smaller one negative. So let's look at our factors. We've got 1 and 36. If I make one negative, that is not going to give me a 5. We've got negative 2, and that'd be 18. If I combine those, that would be 16, which is not 5. Negative 3 and 12. If I combine those, I get 9, which is not 5. Negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. And when I combine those, I get a 5h. So there are my factors. So again, I am going to split 5h into negative 4h and positive 9h. Negative 4h plus 9h, okay? I want to be strategic about how I arrange them though, okay? So we're going to take, I'll just leave this, I'm going to ignore the 3 for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this 6h squared. I'm going to leave a big space for this and then a minus 6. Okay, I need to be able to factor out. If I put 4h first, 6 and 4, I can factor something out. I could also factor something out with 6 and 9. So it really does not matter which way you go. So I'm going to do 6h squared minus 4h plus 9h minus 6. All right. Now we are going to group these. By the way, this is called the factoring by the grouping method. And now we're going to factor out from here. Don't forget the 3. I'm just going to write that there for a second. All right. If I were to factor out a 2, I can factor out a 2. And I can factor out an h. So it's 2h times 6h squared divided by 2h is 3h minus 4h divided by 2h is 2. I got that plus sign. Now 9h minus 6, what can I factor out there? Factor a 3 out. If I factor a 3 out, that would be 3h minus 2. Now notice, now we have common factors in both terms. 3h squared, 3h squared. And if I factor those out, 2h plus 3 is what's left. All right, so we've got 3h minus 2 times what's left, 2h plus 3. But we also have this 3, so we need to put a 3 back out there. Don't forget that. It's important. So if you were to multiply this out, you would end up with 6h squared plus 5h minus 6, and then you multiply it times 3, and you'll end up with what you started with. All right, let's look at number 3, 10d squared plus 17d minus 20. Oh, this is a little bit ugly. Can I factor anything out? 10, 17, 20? Nope. All right, so I got to multiply 10 and negative 20, and that would be negative 200. Okay. My factors, I have to have one negative, one positive factor to give me 200. And they need to combine to make a positive 17. Since this is positive, that tells me my bigger factor also has to be positive. All right, so we've got 1 and 200. 200 has to be positive, that would be negative. If I combine those, nowhere near 17. We got -2 times 100. Combine those, nope. 3 does not go, 4. -4 and 50. Combine those, nope. -5 and 40. Combine those, that does not give me 17. 6 does not go into 200, 7 does not. 8 and 25, so -8 and 25. When I combine those, this is promising. Yep, that gives me 17D. All right, so I am going to separate 17D into -8D plus 25D. All right, and I've got to be strategic in how I place them. All right, so I've got 10D squared. I'm going to leave a big space for this, and then a -20. What can I factor out of a 10? Can I factor something out of 10 and 8? The answer is yes, so I can put that first. -8D plus 25D. All right, so again, I have put this in the place of 17D. Now I group them and factor again. What can I factor out of 10 and 8? Well, the answer is 2. So 2, oh, and I can factor out a D, I almost forgot that. Erase that. Also the D, 2D. All right, 10D squared divided by 2D is 5D. Minus 8D divided by 2D, I'm sorry, is 4. Plus, all right, what can I factor out of 25 and 20? Well, I can factor a 5. And then 5 goes into 25D, or if you divide 25D by 5, you get 5D minus 20 divided by 5 is 4. All right, we have 5D minus 4, common factor in both terms. So I can factor that out, and that leaves 2D plus 5. So 5D minus 4, when it's factored out, what's left is 2D plus 5. All right, there's number 3. Let's look at number 4. 10x squared minus 9x plus 6. Can I factor anything out of these numbers? The answer is no. So we are going to multiply 10 times positive 6. That gives me positive 60. Okay, here's an interesting thing. B is negative. Since 60 is positive, I can have 2 negative factors multiply together to get 60. So that tells me that both have to be negative because B is negative. All right, 1 and 60, I can tell, or -1, -60. That's not going to give me -9, -2, and -30. Will that give me 9? Nope. -3 and -20. Will that give me 9? No. -4 and -15. Will that give me 9 if I combine them? Nope. -5 and -12. Will that give me 9? Nope. -6 and -10. If I combine those, that will not give me -9. 7 won't work, 8 won't work, 9, 10. Oh, all right, none of these worked. I've gone through all the factors. Let me double check. -1 and -60 is -61. -2 and -30, that's -32. That's -23. That's -19, -17, -16. No -9. So since we cannot do that, this is prime. We got to write prime. This is prime. It cannot be factored. All right, let's move on to number 5. 9r squared plus 15r plus 6. Can we factor something out of 9, 15, and 6? Well, the answer is 3. I can factor out a 3. So if we factor out a 3, we will end up with 3r squared plus 5r plus 2. All right. Now we're going to put this 3 to the side. We'll apply it to our answer, but we're going to put it to the side. Multiply a and c. 3 times 2 is 6. Okay? It's positive, so either both factors are positive or both are negative. All right, since this is positive, they're both positive. So 1 and 6 and 3 and 2. Which ones can I combine to give me 5? It's going to be 3 and 2. So it's going to be a positive 3r plus 2r. And when I combine them, I get 5r. All right, so let's rewrite this. I'm going to rewrite this, leaving a large space. So instead of 5r, I could put plus 3r plus 2r. So 3r squared, and again, we'll come back to this. Leave your blank plus 2. I've got to be strategic about what am I going to pair with the 3r squared. Will I pair the 3r or the 2r? Well, what can I factor out? I can factor out if I pair it with the 3r. So I'm going to put plus 3r plus 2r. All right, so I've rewritten this, but instead of 5r, it's plus 3r plus 2r, but it's the same thing. Now I'm going to group them. And if you're strategic about them, they will always group in this manner. I'm going to group them and then factor. What can I factor out of 3r squared plus 3r? I can factor out a 3r. And 3r squared divided by 3r is just r plus, this would be a 1. Plus, what can I factor out of 2r and 2? I can factor a 2r, or 2, excuse me. And 2r divided by 2 is just r plus 1. All right, once I've got that, both terms have r plus 1 as a common factor. So I can factor that out. I'm going to factor out r plus 1. And what's left? 3r plus 2. 3r plus 2. But don't forget the 3 that we started with. So this is your answer. All right, we've done 5 together. Let's do a couple on your actual paper. And I didn't really decide which one. The last ones are usually more challenging. So let's do 23 and 24. All right, 23. First step, can I factor anything out of the whole thing? I've got a 9, I've got a 6, I've got an 8. The answer is no. Second step, multiply A times C. 9 times negative 8 is negative 72. Now my factors, to get a negative 72, one of my factors has to be positive and one has to be negative. B is positive, so that tells me the larger factor has to be positive, so that when I combine them, I get a positive answer. All right, let's look at our factors of negative 72. So our larger one is positive. We could do negative 1 and 72. Combine them, that does not give me a 6. Negative 2 and 36. I combine them, that does not give me a 6. Negative 3 and 24. Combine them, nope. Negative 4 and 18. When I combine them, that does not give me a 6. 5 is not a factor. Negative 6 and 12. Oh, there it is. Negative 6 plus 12 is positive 6. So these are my factors. So instead of 6p, I'm going to put negative 6p plus 12p. I'm substituting that for 6p. But I've got to arrange it so that I need to be strategic. All right, so I've got 9p squared. That's my first term. Do I want to pair it with negative 6p or positive 12p? Well, it really doesn't matter because you can factor out of either one. So if it doesn't matter, just pick one and go with it. All right, so I'm going to put minus 6p plus 12p, and then we got minus 8. All right, now we group them. First two terms, second two terms and do factoring again. What can I factor out of 9p squared minus 6p? I can factor a 3 and a p. So 3p times 9p squared divided by 3p is 3p, minus 6p divided by 3p is 2. Plus, all right, what can I factor out of 12p minus 8? I can factor a 4. 4 times 12p, or 12p divided by 4 is 3p, minus 8 divided by 4 is 2. I just want to mention that when you factor this, you have to factor out the greatest common factor. All right, so we've got 3p minus 2 as common factors, so I can factor that out again, leaving 3p plus 4. All right, so it is 3p minus 2 times 3p plus 4. And if you need to, multiply it out and see if it ends up there. All right, 24. You can see this is taking up quite a bit of space, so you may want to do 13 through 22 on paper. All right, can we factor anything out of the whole thing? We got a 6, a 13, and a 6. Nope. So we got to multiply. 6 times 6 is 36. It's going to be positive, but b is negative. So what does that tell me about the factors? They both have to be negative. All right, so I've got -1 and -36. And if I combine them, that does not give me -13. -2 and -18. Nope. -3 and -12. We're getting closer, but if I combine them, that's -15. Nope. -4 and -9. When I combine them, there it is. -4 plus -9 is -13. So instead of -13q, I'm going to do -4q minus 9q. So again, I'm going to write this, and I'm going to substitute this in here, but I may flip them around. Okay, so 6q squared. Now, do I want to attach the 6q squared with the 4q or the 9q? It doesn't matter because you can factor out either way. My dog wants to go outside. So just pick one and let's go with it. -4q minus 9q plus 6. All right, so I've substituted that for -13q. I'm going to draw a line. All right, group them. What can I factor out of 6q squared minus 4q? I can factor out a 2q. And if you were to do that, you would have 3q minus 2. All right, this gets a little bit tricky because of this minus sign. This minus sign kind of makes things a little bit tricky. But what can I factor out of 9q squared, 9q plus 6? Well, I can factor out a 3. So it's going to be minus 3. But when I distribute, I'm distributing a -3. So this needs to be 3q. Okay, that would give me the -9q. But if I want a plus 6, it has to be -2, not plus 2. All right. So whenever you have a negative here, this middle sign is going to change. That's so that when you redistribute it, you get the sign you need. Okay. We both have 3q minus 2 as factors, and what's left is 2q minus 3. So let's factor out the common, 3q minus 2, and when I factor that out, 2q minus 3 is left. All right, that was a crash course in factoring polynomials. You may need to rewind this video and go over some more. If you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You guys have a great day. Talk to you later.